Order, please. I have a speaker's ruling this morning that I'd like to read before we go into the daily routine. On Tuesday, April the 12th, the member for Richmond rose on what he described as a point of order, or possibly, he said, a point of privilege, as it went to the rules of this House. It is a point of order as it deals with the rules and usages of the House, but it does not approach the area of privilege known as contempt. The member's complaint was that a person whom he understood to be a political staff person for the governing party had posted a comment on the website known as Twitter regarding activities here in the legislature and had included a photo of the floor of this chamber taken from the gallery. The House passed a resolution in 1991 respecting the use of television or camera equipment in this House. That resolution set out a number of rules that have remained in effect to this day. As a member for Richmond pointed out in item 6 in those rules states, only media personnel accredited by the Speaker in consultation with the press gallery are permitted to shoot still or TV films from the gallery. The seating chart available at the entrance to the gallery area sets out several rules in bold print in highlighted box on the front of the brochure, and one of those rules state, photographs or recordings are not permitted. The member delivered a printout of the Twitter posting to me, and it contains a photo taken from the galleries in direct contravention of the rule passed by the House and set out on the seating brochure. For a person to flout the rule and deliberately take a photo, knowing it is against the rules, could be considered a contempt of Parliament. So it is a grave matter. Further to the posting on Twitter and the comment used could be considered embarrassing. I am not satisfied that the person in question set about with intent to flout our rules, but I am very disappointed at what has taken place, largely because it involves a staff person for one of our political parties, with whom I have expected to be aware of these rules in place here. I am very disappointed that the person involved did this. I've asked all members, ministers, and caucus chairs to make any staff who come to this place on their behalf clearly aware of the decorum and rules expected in this place. And further, I do not want this type of occurrence to happen again, and I take anything like this very seriously. And I thank you for your attention in this matter. Daily routine, presenting and reading of petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to table a certified copy of an order in Council dated March 31st, 2011, pursuant to Section 27 of the Finance Act, respecting additional appropriations for the fiscal year 2010-2011.
The report is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table the 2010 annual report of the Workers' Compensation Board of Nova Scotia. Thank you.
The report is tabled. Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a bill entitled An Act Respecting Certain Financial Measures.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Finance begs leave to table a bill, An Act Respecting Certain Financial Measures.
Bill number 27, entitled An Act Respecting Certain Financial Measures.
Order the bill be read a second time on a future day. Notices of motion. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the 2009 election campaign, then NDP leader and now Premier indicated he would honour all previous commitments made by the former government. And whereas on March 22, 2011, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations informed municipalities that he is tearing up the agreement on mandatory payments on province-wide services. And whereas yesterday, the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations, during question period, admitted that despite the NDP government not honouring their side of the agreement, they expect municipalities to foot the bill for the Municipal Auditor General and the Property Valuation Services Corporation. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Justice admit that his government's actions will lead to increased property taxes and apologise to municipalities and the people of Nova Scotia for yet another broken NDP promise. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. Before we continue on with notices of motion, I wonder if I can have permission of the House to revert back to introduction of bills. Agreed? Agreed. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 371 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Highways Act.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 371 of the Revised Statute 1989, the Public Highways Act.
Bill number 28, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 371 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Highways Act.
Order that bill be read a second time on a future date. Thank you. I will now recognize the honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on notices of motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this government's decision to break the Memorandum of Understanding with Nova Scotia's municipalities is just another example of the NDP digging deeper into the pockets of Nova Scotians. And whereas the NDP refuses to do the hard work to balance their own provincial budget, but then forces municipalities to do it for them. And whereas the Minister of Finance recently said, and I quote, if there is any increase in municipal taxes, it is 100% due to the decisions that will be made by municipalities. It will not be due to anything that this government has done. End quote. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the legislature urge the government to stop blaming municipalities for the NDP's financial mismanagement and admit that shifting the tax burden from one level of government to another accomplishes exactly nothing. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today marks the 99th anniversary of the tragic sinking of the Titanic, and whereas Halifax was not only the closest landfall to the sinking, but also served as a home port for rescue operations as well as a media center. And whereas today our strong legacy with the Titanic can be found in historic grave sites throughout Halifax, where victims of the sinking of the Titanic were laid to rest. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House remember this tragic event and acknowledge the individuals, past and present, who continue to commemorate this historical anniversary. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the 2009 election campaign, then NDP leader and now Premier indicated that he would honour all previous commitments made by the former government. Whereas on March 22, 2011, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations informed municipalities that he is tearing up the agreement on mandatory payments on province-wide services. Whereas yesterday, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, during question period, admitted that despite the NDP government not honouring their side of the agreement, they expect the municipality to foot the bill for Municipal Auditor General and the Property Evaluation Services Corporation. Therefore, be resolved that the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations admit that his actions will lead to an increased property taxes and apologize to municipalities and the people of Nova Scotia for yet another broken NDP promise. And I'd ask for waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I should move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Titanic struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sunk 99 years ago today, and whereas the loss of life was considerable, more than 1,500 perished, and many of the victims are buried here in Nova Scotia, and whereas, beginning at midnight last night on Twitter, the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic recreated the wireless traffic connected with that tragedy, creating a fascinating educational opportunity. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic for its creative commemoration of this event. I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the 2009 election campaign, then NDP leader and now Premier indicated he would honour all previous commitments made by the former government, and whereas on March 22, 2011, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations informed municipalities that he is tearing up the agreement on mandatory payments on province-wide services. And whereas yesterday the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations during question period admitted that despite the NDP government not honouring their side of the agreement, they expected municipalities to foot the bill for the Municipal Auditor General and the Property Valuation Services Corporation. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism admit that his actions will lead to increased property taxes and apologize to municipalities and the people of Nova Scotia for yet another broken NDP promise.
There has been a request for waivers. No? No request for waiver. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the NDP government is withholding and hiding a study on the socio-economic impacts of gambling, even though the Freedom of Information Review officer said the government needs to release the document, and whereas while in opposition, the member from Halifax Fairview served as a counsel in O'Connor versus Nova Scotia, and after the court ruled in their favour, the member said it establishes a precedent, really forever. When a government has made a decision, it must release the information that led to that decision, so Nova Scotians can judge for themselves whether it was a good decision. Whereas in 2001, the member from Halifax Fairview said, secrecy is a habit that I left unchallenged, becomes a permanent feature of government. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly call on the Minister of Finance to offer pro bono services to the Canadian press to ensure that secrecy does not become a permanent feature of his government. Mr. Speaker, I will table the motion.
The motion is tabled. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the 2009 election campaign, the then NDP leader and now Premier indicated he would honour all commitments made by the former government. Whereas on March 22, 2011, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations informed municipalities that he is tearing up the agreement on mandatory payments on province-wide services. And whereas yesterday, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations, during question period, admitted that despite the NDP government not honouring their side of the agreement, they expected municipalities to foot the bill for the Municipal Auditor General and the Property Valuation Service Corporation. Therefore, be it resolved that the Premier admit that his actions will lead to increased property taxes and apologize to municipalities and the people of Nova Scotia for yet another NDP broken promise.
The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the 2009 election campaign, then NDP leader and now Premier indicated he would honour all previous commitments made by the former government. And whereas on March 22, 2011, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations informed municipalities that he is tearing up the agreement on mandatory payments on province-wide services. And whereas yesterday the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, during question period, admitted that despite the NDP government not honouring their side of the agreement, they expect municipalities to foot the bill for the Municipal Auditor General and Property Valuation Services Corporation. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Community Services admit that the government's actions will lead to increased property taxes and will have a deep and negative impact on the CBRM and all municipalities in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without any debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the 2009 election campaign, then NDP leader and now Premier indicated he would honour all previous commitments made by the former government. And whereas on March 22, 2011, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations informed municipalities that is tearing up the agreement that reduced the amount property taxpayers are forced to pay for provincial services. And whereas yesterday the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations during question period admitted that despite the NDP government not honouring their side of the agreement, they expect municipalities to foot the bill for the Municipal Auditor General, Property Valuation Services Corporation, and continue to pay for provincial responsibilities. Therefore, be it resolved, the Minister of Energy admit that his actions will lead to increased property taxes and apologise to municipalities and the people of Nova Scotia for yet another broken NDP promise. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the 2009 election campaign, then NDP leader, now Premier, indicated he would honour all previous commitments made by the former government. And whereas on March 22, 2011, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations informed municipalities that he is tearing up the agreement on mandatory payments on province-wide services. And whereas yesterday the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations during question period admitted that despite the NDP government not honouring their side of the agreement, they expect municipalities to foot the bill for the Municipal Auditor General and the Property Evaluation Service Corporation. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture admit that his actions will lead to increased property taxes and apologise to municipalities and the people of Nova Scotia for yet another broken NDP promise. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? No. I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas communities, organizations and municipalities across Nova Scotia have used the week of April 11th to 16th to honour the dedication of volunteers, and whereas the volunteers throughout Nova Scotia contribute their time, talent, professionalism and community spirit to make our province the great place that it is. And whereas volunteers in Nova Scotia are leading to positive change on all fronts, from community health care, sports and recreation, heritage and the arts, environmental protection and advocacy, disaster relief, international development, and volunteer firefighting and search and rescue. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House extend our deepest appreciation to Nova Scotia's greatest asset, our volunteers, and salute their efforts in making Nova Scotia and the world a much better place to live. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to draw the members' attention to some folks who are in the East Gallery. My East and West gets backwards. I'd like to welcome members, staff from the Metropolitan Regional Housing Authority, NSGU, Local 47, who are here to take in some of the proceedings and are hoping to speak to a few ministers, I believe, as well as a number of members from my own constituency there. So perhaps we can welcome them.
We welcome all visitors to our gallery and hope you enjoyed today's proceedings. I will now recognize the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House on supply.
There has been a motion. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. We will now take a short recess so I can let the minister set up with her staff, and we'll now going in to the Committee on Supply. The honourable member for, oh, you're going to go, I will now recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth East on a request for Committee on Supply.
There was no vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
And it's my pleasure to speak today going into supply, and I think it's timely that I will speak about the members from the various municipalities who are coming and joining us today outside protesting on the streets because the government has torn up an agreement on a memorandum of understanding on the issue of municipal taxes. A number of years ago, the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities had an agreement done called Fair and Equitable Funding. And that study was done by a number of university professors who looked at the issue of how municipalities, what they pay for in terms of provincial services. And we all understand that going back to 1996, there was service exchange, and the province took on certain responsibilities and the municipalities took on certain other responsibilities. We now learn, and in 2007, the previous government, to their credit, did actually begin that process. No, I know that, but credit where credit is due. They did sign that agreement, and it was supported by all parties at the time, is my understanding, that what would happen is there would be a phase out of responsibilities for things like education, corrections, and social housing, which the municipalities had no control over. Mr. Speaker, we of course understand that taxation without representation is a significant issue, and that was the fundamental premise of this issue. So what's happened in that time is we have reduced the amount, or the province has reduced the amount that municipalities could expect to pay for that, and that was expected to continue for a number of years. In return, municipalities took over control of the Property Services Valuation Corporation, or assessments from the province, and as well took on the responsibility of creating the position of an Auditor General, both provincially and also there was a separate one for the Halifax Regional Municipality due to its size, and we already know that that person is already underway. Mr. Speaker, we are obviously deeply concerned about this change by the government, because we know, as the minister himself has said, that there is only one taxpayer, and that taxpayer is now going to be hit with higher property taxes. And as the member for Preston quite rightly pointed out the other day, the fact is that you are going to hit a certain group of taxpayers for services that are delivered by people, including those who don't pay property taxes directly. Mr. Speaker, the minister and the premier have tried to say that this is a prevention of uploading. That, of course, is not remotely the case. Mr. Speaker, we know that the truth of the matter, or the facts of the matter, are that these were provincial services that the municipalities were being asked to help fund, and then that was being gradually phased out, and municipalities in return picked up services. This was done, the work on this was done independently by a number of respected university researchers and professors around the province who looked at this issue and said that it was simply not right that municipalities should have to pick up these services. Now, there has been an argument by the minister, and by the premier that the municipalities will not be paying any more than they are now going into the future, and that it shouldn't impact them. But of course, we know that's not the case, because the minister in the press briefing has indicated that there are certain costs that will increase along with assessments, which means that individuals will pay more. And we also know that municipalities were asked a number of years ago by the department and by others to budget on a 5-year basis, and they enter into collective agreements. They enter into long-term contracts, such as for landfills and garbage collection and recycling, and many other services that they enter into long-term agreements for. And because they enter into those long-term agreements, they had those costs fixed for a number of years. So now, and they fixed those costs based on the room that they felt they would have on tax bills without actually being forced to raise taxes. Mr. Speaker, we know that a lot of municipalities are having difficulty. We know that CBRM, for example, is facing serious financial challenges. They perhaps are facing the most significant, but we also know that there are many smaller municipalities facing challenges. We have been given information by the municipalities. HRM, I think, is $46 million over 4 years that it will impact them, and CBRM is $3.2 million. And I think theirs might be, I think the 3.2 is probably annually over the 4 years. So that's a significant hit. We know, and I'd like to talk about the CBRM situation for a second, is that we know that they have significant debt challenges, and if they're forced to move this funding towards the debt or towards other costs, that will reduce their capacity to deal with real and pressing needs. We also know that municipalities across the province are going to be dealing with the challenges of wastewater increases and water quality increases, which are important. And don't get me wrong, Mr. Speaker, those are important things to have addressed. We want the water quality issues addressed, drinking water. We want the sanitary issues addressed, absolutely. But the municipalities can't then be beat over the head like a whack-a-mole program when the province finds that it's having financial troubles. And that's what this is all about. We know that, you know, from the study that was done prior to 2007, we know that property tax is the wrong way to be charging for things like education, social services, and corrections, issues which the municipalities have no say in and no representation over. And I know there are members on all sides who have sat on municipal councils and know that they get the calls to answer for those charges despite the fact that they have no say in them and no control over them. And that's significant, Mr. Speaker. And what this government has done is unfair. And for a number of weeks, the minister used the example of the Memorandum of Understanding and said, well, there's a clause in the Memorandum of Understanding that if the financial situation of the province changes, we can back out. That's in a lot of Memorandums of Understanding, Mr. Speaker, and frankly, if I was holding a Memorandum of Understanding with the government that had any kind of out clause, I would be extremely concerned at this point, because of course that means that any one of those agreements is up for change. And Mr. Speaker, this went even further. This went further than just a Memorandum of Understanding. This was entrenched in legislation in the Financial Measures Act of 2008, and this morning the Minister of Finance introduced legislation to repeal that provision of the 2008 Financial Measures Act. That should be of concern to everybody, because Mr. Speaker, it was more than just a Memorandum of Understanding. It was the law of the land. It was passed by this legislature. It was the law of the land, and Nova Scotians have a right and an expectation to believe that the law of the land will be upheld by their government and won't be arbitrarily changed. And that's exactly what's happened, and it's happened because the province wants to balance the books on the back of property taxpayers in this province and on the backs of the municipalities. The municipalities who they already know are having financial challenges, because this isn't saying to the municipalities, well, we think that you should pick up the cost for garbage collection, which of course is a municipal service. This is, we think you should pick it up for social housing, which is a provincial responsibility. This is, we think you should pick it up for education, which is a provincial responsibility. This is why those university researchers and professors found when they did their research that it was fundamentally unfair for the province to charge those fees. And at the time, obviously UNSM and the other municipalities would have preferred for those charges to disappear overnight. That was obviously impractical at the time, and the agreement was reached to phase out the majority of these charges. And in return, let's not forget that the municipalities gave up things in return. They took on the responsibility for the property, what was assessment services at the time under Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, and what has become in what has changed now to become the Property Services Valuation Corporation, and the municipalities have taken responsibility for that. They've taken not only the financial responsibility, but the governance responsibility, and they have also taken the responsibility for the costs and the calls from residents, because they are directly accountable for the operation of that organization. They have also, as I indicated, taken the cost of the Auditor General, and if I'm not mistaken, in HRM alone, picking up that responsibility is a roughly $400,000 annual cost. I don't know what the cost will be for the Provincial Auditor General for the other municipalities, but one has to assume that if it's not that much, it would be in that ballpark, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And that, Mr. Speaker, is significant. And that's why you're going to see in 23 minutes, wardens, councillors, and mayors from various parts of Nova Scotia here at the legislature. At 10 o'clock, they will be here because they believe that this is an important issue, and an important issue for the taxpayers in their respective municipalities. You know, Mr. Speaker, I don't disagree that the province has some challenging financial situations. I don't disagree. I don't dispute that for a second. However, it is not right to download those costs, and to suggest that it's prevention of an upload is disingenuous, because they are provincial services. They are very clearly provincial services. All the research at the time, all the background on it showed that they are provincial services. And you know, the minister is absolutely right. There's a clause in that MOU that allows him to tear it up. It doesn't mean he should. It doesn't mean that, you know, and I remember that, you know, to use the Minister of Finance's line, this crowd over here jumping up and down when the Atlantic Accord, quite rightly jumping up and down when the Atlantic Accord was torn up, which also had a similar clause in it. But, you know, so what's going to happen on the next one? There's, you know, maybe we should be, and they were right to jump up and down about that, just as we jumped up and down about that. But the fact is that this went further than an MOU and was entrenched in legislation, which the Minister of Finance introduced a bill today to repeal. And that's troubling, Mr. Speaker, and that's why these representatives of various municipalities are here today, or will be here today. They are concerned about this. They shouldn't be expected to answer to property taxpayers for increased property tax costs as a result of the province giving up on its responsibility to pay for services that it has control and jurisdiction over. There was a reason in 1996 that the province took over social services and social housing. And there was a reason why. Well, it was a Liberal government, and they did that for very good reasons, because they knew municipalities couldn't bear those costs. I'm glad you brought that up. And now the NDP, the minister, is trying to download those costs back to them. Like, Mr. Speaker, I can't believe that the minister is, I don't know if he's suggesting that's a bad thing, that they just save him from debt, because all you do is you got to look at Ottawa or Toronto at the moment, who still have a responsibility for the delivery and funding of social services. And if you talk to either one of their mayors, they'll tell you that's the biggest challenge, because it's a very difficult thing to charge against property tax. And so those services were taken on by the province, and municipalities in 1996 took over other services in return. It was a service exchange. It was an agreement that was reached, and it made sense, so that services that were local and properties. And so from 1996 until the study was commissioned shortly after 2000, and the fact is that study looked at it and said, okay, we have to now move to a point where the funding, municipalities pay for and have governance over the services they deliver, and provinces pay for and deliver the services that they have responsibility for. And that just makes sense because the Minister of Community Services answers for community services issues, as the Minister should. The municipalities now answer for assessment services because they are responsible for the Property Services Valuation Corporation. And you know, and the minister the minister has just asked about supplementary funding. This is great. He's helping me fill the 15 minutes. Well, I'll answer that. You know, the fact is that residents voted in a plebiscite, Mr. Speaker, the residents voted by choice to add supplementary funding, but that's taxation with representation because the municipality sets that tax rate. In fact, they just said it last week or 2 weeks ago on supplementary funding, and they reach an agreement with the school board on what services will be provided for that. So that is a choice by the municipality to do it. They have governance over that. They do not have governance over how social services is delivered, how correction services is delivered, nor how social housing is delivered. So thank you. So supplementary funding actually proves my point, Mr. Speaker, that it's taxation with representation only. So, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the time of the House today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have an opportunity this morning to speak going into supply on what is indeed a very important issue when it comes to things like agreements, things like credibility, responsibility, Mr. Speaker, and we don't hear it very often, but there is only one taxpayer here in this province. No matter how many ways you look at it, you try to do it, doesn't matter. There's still only one taxpayer. Mr. Speaker, I spent a couple of years on the municipal council, town of Windsor, prior to being elected here to this House a number of years ago, and I know the importance that municipal council has, responsibility they have, the grassroots level that they have, and the expectation from the local people that they represent. It's very important, and the responsibility they have, of course, is trying to manage as best they can with the dollars they can, and fortunately, unlike federal and provincial governments, they're not allowed to go into a deficit position, and they try to do their very best, although they are struggling financially, and I think that's very well known across the board. Hence the reason that this agreement has and is going to have some long-term effects, because I think it's fair to say that municipal units have budgeted in this current year and previous years based on that agreement and where it's going to take them in projects that they can do, infrastructure projects, whether it be roads or whatever the projects might be, their water, their sewer, all of the things that towns and municipal units are responsible to maintain, and they have to also have some future idea of where they're going. They have to be able to think well into the future. I know their mandate's only 4 years, but they're certainly planning well beyond that when it comes to project, and it's fair for them to do that. They have to do that. That's responsible government, and they are, as I said, really the grassroots level where people are going and talking and trying to, you know, get their things done, like the assessments and taxes. Where do they go when they have that argument? They make it there. Who sets it? They do. All of it is based on the dollars and cents. Now, this agreement being torn up, yeah, there's a clause in it that says, yep, the minister can tear it up when he wants, he or she. That's great. They gave him a few hours notice and they tore it up. That's not so great. You know, we need, it's in effect for a year. What consultation was done? None. I'm hopeful, I guess, and having been in the seat of a municipal councillor in the past, that the government will come to the table and put something back that's just as good, if not better. I'm not holding my breath, nor is council. They've not yet had any idea, the UNSM, where this is going, but I know that they don't like it. And oftentimes, people don't like change. I'm willing to stand here, and I'm going to say that people are often worried and they're scared what change will bring. Well, change is not often necessarily, not always a bad thing. There can be some positives in it. So I'm going to hope that there is some positives in it. The issue here is the credibility issue. And the minister's hollering across the floor there is. Well, that's yet to be seen because there's been no discussion. You know, some of the questions out there, well, when are they planning to bring us to the table and have this discussion? Maybe they will, and maybe they won't. There would be other agreements that have been written where people would argue that no consultation or no discussion has been had. We're going to do what we want, and you're going to have to take it. You're going to have to eat it as it is. Well, you know, there's some opportunities, I guess, with this agreement being torn up. Some are going to have to look at the positive side and say, what might them opportunities be? Well, you know, municipalities are different all across the board. Towns versus rural municipalities have different agreements. Perhaps it's time to look at the road agreement, just as an example, town of Windsor, where I come from. In the municipality, transportation, province looks after. Town of Windsor, town taxpayers look after. Perhaps they should be looking after all the roads, town included. There has to be some room if we're just going to step in and tear up agreements that are already in place. They have to be able to budget. They have to be able to survive. I'm not sure that tearing up the MOU is going to help small towns like Windsor and Spring Hill and other small towns across the province of Nova Scotia that are already financially strapped. with budgeting. It's not going to help with infrastructure. It's not going to help with anything, from what they can tell. What about the town's task force? I know I had a chance to question the minister about this during estimate debate, and wasn't a whole lot answered on it other than they're hoping to get started pretty soon. But if you sit and you talk to them municipal towns, talk to Paul Baisley in the town of Windsor, he's the mayor there. He's anxious. He's more than anxious. He's waiting, wanting this thing to get going, and he's now frustrated that nothing's happened. And we need to see town task force underway. We need to see something positive coming out of that. Even a discussion in his mind would be positive with some direction or some negotiation and opportunity. But so far there's been nothing, and it's just one frustration after the other. And then to have notice of a few hours, and they'll call it a year. I guess it is a year plus a few hours. A year plus a few hours, but the few hours came and it was done. Like I said, no time to sit down, no credibility, but there is a responsibility. The government has to take on the responsibility for doing just this, Mr. Speaker, and the municipal units are going to say today when they arrive here, I'm sure they're going to, if they haven't already, and I'm sure most of them have, advised the minister of their concerns and their position on this. I'm sure very clearly the frustration that they're going through, the anxiety that they're going through, wondering what they're going to do well into the future. How long did it take to negotiate the last agreement? Well, they may not have had everything, and I don't think you ever get everything in any agreement that you negotiate, regardless of what it is, but they had an agreement, one that all parties agreed on, one that sent some kind of direction for the municipal units going forward, and then all of a sudden that's gone. How long will it take, I think, is one of the fears, to negotiate another agreement. Could take a very long time, but in all likelihood, let's see a year out, maybe 2 years out, you could almost project this as being political, and it would all of a sudden arrive and be signed just prior to the next election as a ploy. And if you talk, these aren't my words, these are the worries and concerns of municipal councillors who are out there trying to figure out where we're going. They don't know what to do even going forward now as far as budgeting goes. And we've already heard in this House how they are strapped. We've already heard that they can't negotiate and plan for a deficit budget. They can't do it. Towns are in a position, and a lot of municipal units, not just towns, but a lot of municipal units are in a position whereby they don't know what's going to happen next year with programs. How many people, how many organizations come to any municipal unit, whether it be a hockey club or a daycare or you name it, are coming and asking for money with an expectation that that level of government is there to assist them. They'll all claim we pay high taxes, we should get something back, there should be grants in lieu. I would say that that is all out the window right now when it comes to planning, because we don't know where it's going, and we don't know what agreements will be made, we don't know what transfers will be made, we don't know about roads. There are ways, there are opportunities to always come back to the table and to always negotiate new and further agreements without tearing up what's there and just saying, we'll let you know. Mr. Speaker, it has to be noted the importance of what this means to the municipal units, and I'm not sure that the government understands clearly, and if they do, the appearance is that they don't care. Well, I would really hate to think that any government doesn't care, but if you talk to the municipal councillors, and there'll be an opportunity here today, and you're going to hear them protesting about their disappointment as to where this has gone, and their anxiety about where it's going. It's just not right, Mr. Speaker. Governments have to stand up, they have to be credible, they have to be responsible. We are not showing that in Nova Scotia today when we do things like tearing up agreements with our municipalities, who are, as I said before, the grassroots, the heart and soul of communities. People are wondering, you know, not just the councillors, they're wondering where they're going to get support from when council tells them, well, we don't know where we're going in the next year. How are we going to support you? How are we going to pave the roads they're complaining about in the towns? Just again as an example, they're not. Things will be held up unless there's an agreement that's going to come to place very quickly, and we've no commitment on that. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, just a few minutes, I wanted to get on and have a chat about that and let people know that this party does care. We were responsible for negotiating and sitting down in the years past and putting this agreement in place. As I said, agreements are good things when everyone can agree, You don't always get what you want, but you can reach agreements that are good. And at this point in time, there is some worries moving forward on behalf of the UNSM and municipal units all across the province. So with that, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity this morning to speak going in supply. And I look forward to other comments. Perhaps the minister will get up and enlighten us a bit, or other members of his government will get up and enlighten us as to where this isn't going. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise today and speak on an issue that is important for me and for many people in my community, and that is this week's announcement with in regards to autism. It is the investment that this government made to the autism community and to the people, the families that face this issue every day is quite an accomplishment, I think, for any government. I know I had the opportunity to be at the announcement. I saw a few folks from the constituency that I represent there, as well as the member from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, the Ministers of Health, Education, and Community Services, and of course the Premier. And the member from Argyle was there as well. And Mr. Speaker, what this means for families is that under previous governments, the EIBI program was the unfortunate was that it was given to families under a lottery. And Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to stand in my place that under this government, that will no longer happen. That will no longer happen. It's an investment. It is an investment in the families of this province of over $5 million. And Mr. Speaker, it means a lot to people. There was a wonderful woman who spoke at the announcement who said, and I'll try to quote her as best I can, but she said, "This investment is the best thing that I have ever heard from any government." She did. She did say that. It's true, $5.5 million. And 5.5, and that means that families in this province will no longer have to be in a lottery for this service. Mr. Speaker, autism is faced by many families across Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, let's break down some of the investment. $4 million alone over 2 years will allow families to access the EIBI program. $1.3 million over 3 years to support direct family support program. That will allow families to have the support mechanisms necessary to allow them to receive good services for their child who may have autism. Mr. Speaker, I've received several phone calls from constituents in Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville, who have said, you know, it's such a good thing to hear a government doing. You know, oftentimes, Mr. Speaker, we hear a lot of the negative things that governments or elected officials may do. But Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that this government has taken an initiative like this and moving forward on this. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk a little bit about how this government is making life better for families in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, one of the commitments that our party made in the last election was that we would put this legislature back to work. And Mr. Speaker, I'm also proud to stand here and say that we, in fact, have sat more days than any party in the last 15, 20 years. You know, and during the fall 2009 session, Mr. Speaker, we sat for 35 days. That's not very many. Okay, well let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because I remember I believe it was one session under the previous government, the Rodney MacDonald government. In fact, I believe that they sat 15 days, 14 days in a year span. Mr. Speaker, that's unacceptable. It's shameful. So, Mr. Speaker, in the spring 2010 session, we sat 32 days, and that was a budget session. Not only did we pass a budget, but there was legislative items that moved forward. Mr. Speaker, in the fall 2010 session, we sat for 30 days. Now, Mr. Speaker, oh yeah, no, it is. That's what we said we would do, and that's what we've done. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that this government has put forward is the Better Care Sooner plan. Now, I know the Minister of Health and Wellness has been up speaking about this in estimates, but Mr. Speaker, you know, Better Care Sooner will allow families to get access to healthcare professionals when and where they need it the most. Now, I know my colleague from Lunenburg, I know that she had an opportunity to have the Minister of Health and Wellness down in her constituency, and the response from, I know, her community was phenomenal. The fact that we will be working to establish collaborative practices, and I know my friend from Cumberland North, I believe, attended the announcement in Parsborough for the first collaborative practice centre being opened up in the province. And Mr. Speaker, it will reduce wait times, and it will ensure that people get the care when they need it. You know, we will also we'll be rolling out the clot-busting drug program across the province, and already that has saved hundreds of lives because of this initiative. We're also ensuring that better drug prices and process for Nova Scotians. You know, we hear often from seniors in this province that drug prices are expensive for them, and this will help us put money back in the pockets of the people who need it the most. So I think that, again, that's a positive thing that we need to focus on, and we need to let our constituents know that these are the sorts of things that we're moving forward on. Mr. Speaker, we also want to talk a little bit about jobs here. Jobs here will, over the next 3 years, our government will commit $200 million to jobs here, and three pillars that are most important in this plan, Mr. Speaker, is innovation, competitiveness, and learning. Three pillars that will move this province forward to allow our economy to grow. And Mr. Speaker, I believe that even in the past last month, we had the lowest unemployment rate of any Atlantic Canadian province. So, Mr. Speaker, that's because we're spending the money wisely and allowing this money to get out to the people and the companies and the businesses that need it the most. Now, Mr. Speaker, part of jobs here was a commitment. We saw a commitment last year from this government, from our government, that decreased the small business tax for the first time since 1992. Mr. Speaker, small business, as we all know, they are the lifeblood of many communities across this province. They employ a large amount of Nova Scotians, and for them to see a decrease in their small business tax was putting $6 million back in their pockets. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to say as well is that we will be decreasing that small business tax again, for the first time since 1992. So back-to-back years that the small business tax went from 5% to 4%. Again, Mr. Speaker, putting money back into the people, into the businesses that employ many people across this province. Mr. Speaker, I also proud to say that we've put an initiative forward to allow to invest in a service that will allow Nova Scotians to get more services delivered to them faster, which will allow a full range of social services within their own local communities. And that's what the announcement of the 211 system. 211 is a positive thing that's happened in many provinces across Canada, and I'm glad to say that we are putting that forward. So, and the positive thing about that, Mr. Speaker, is that we will be the first province in Canada to, in fact, roll this system out province-wide. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that's good. I mean, I know, in fact, in HRM, the Halifax Regional Municipality has the 490-4000 number that you can call and get service, direct service. That's a good service. I tell many of my constituents who may have issues with the municipality or have a road complaint or a bylaw problem, I'd say call 490-4000. So, Mr. Speaker, that will be a positive thing to allow many Nova Scotians to get services in their communities. Now, Mr. Speaker, one last thing that I'd like to talk about before I take my place today is ensuring that this province lives within its means. Now, I know the opposition will say, they're saying one thing and then they're saying another thing. Depends on the day, right? And, they talk about how that we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough to get this province back to balance. Now, Mr. Speaker, I remember the most extensive consultation ever taken by any government in this province, that the Minister of Finance went out and he talked to Nova Scotians. He talked to them. He talked to Nova Scotians. Over 2,000 people came to the events with over 1,000 submissions. Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we heard was that if you try to decrease the spending, if you do it too fast, we will lose the social services and the services that we want to protect. Now, Mr. Speaker, I think that we all have a place in our heart for health care and education in this province. Now, Mr. Speaker, the interesting part is that the opposition will say, well, you're not cutting enough. You're not cutting enough. Well, I haven't heard from them where they would want us to cut. What would they cut? What would they cut? They're not saying it. And then, so Mr. Speaker, that's one thing that, one of the things that we've done is we've stopped the March Madness. We've stopped the March Madness in this province. We've saved multi-millions of dollars from March Madness. Now, Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that the opposition will say, oh, well, that's still not good enough, So, again, they're saying one thing today and then another thing tomorrow, and then maybe on Monday they'll say something else. It depends on the day. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that's irresponsible for them to do those sorts of things. Mr. Speaker, it was the first time since 2005, 2006 that expenses went down. One of the things that I heard when I went to the two consultations I went to was that the government must decrease the amount of money that it spends. We have to. But we have to do it responsibly. We have to do it responsibly to protect the services that we care about the most. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that we're taking a balanced approach. We're listening to Nova Scotians, and I've certainly heard from people in the constituency I represent that they think that we're taking a good approach to this, and moving forward with this province, because we all know, Mr. Speaker, that with a balanced budget, our province will prosper. With a balanced budget, we will continue to be able to deliver the services that each and every one of us care about. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'm always proud to stand up today in my place and talk about the many initiatives that this government has put forward. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I take my place. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, before I get started on the topic I want to talk about here, I want to clarify something that the honourable members just spoke about and indicated that the NDP is the longest setting time in the legislature in the last 20 years. Well, I can tell you I've been around here a lot longer than he has, and I can remember setting for days and days and days and 16-hour days and longer. If he wants to check the record, I think that the number of days that were set at that time, one time in a row, were a whole lot longer than this government has ever set or ever will set. So they want to check the records before they make statements in this House. The other issue I really want to talk about here is property taxes. We talk about this memorandum of understanding, and I want to really clarify to people in the community that may be listening to this today. This memorandum of understanding doesn't sound like much if you're sitting home and watching this debate on television, or if you're thinking about it. But I'll tell you what it means to you as a taxpayer. Your property taxes are going up. Your property taxes are going to go up. That's the simple way to put it. There's no other easy way to put it, but that's what's going to happen because of this memorandum of understanding being cancelled by this NDP government. Your property taxes will go up. And the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Affairs continually says there's only one taxpayer, but there is two taxpayers in this province. Ones that pay property tax and ones that pay no property tax. And I can tell you, the more you download on the property tax side of it, the less likely people are to be able to afford their homes when they retire. Now, most people think that's not a serious issue, you know, it doesn't happen. Well, I can tell you in my riding, and I spoke about this before, a lot of people are losing their properties because they cannot pay their property taxes. They cannot pay them. So if you put more burden on those property tax owners, more burden for services they shouldn't even be paying for, they are going to continually, more and more people are either going to lose their homes or they're going to be forced to sell them and move into an apartment someplace. Sell the one thing, the biggest investment most people ever have in their lives, they're going to have to sell it. They spend years and years and years saving money to buy it, years and years and years fixing the properties, making them better to live in, more comfortable the way they want them, and at the end of the day, the retirement and the golden years, the time that they could do it, they'll have to sell their property. And this is happening. I'm getting calls all the time right now, and they don't understand about this memorandum of understanding. And then this fantastic budget that the NDP is talking about with 1,400 new user fees, another cost that people have to bear. Then we add the 2% on the GST, which everybody pays, everybody in this province every time they buy anything. So there's more than one taxpayer in this province. So more we download on the municipalities, especially when there was agreement in place and arrangements have been made by many municipalities to indeed use this money to do the upgrades that they need in their communities and not cost the taxpayers more. Things that are being downloaded again or new programs that they have to do to keep up with sewer and water systems, which need to be done. They have to be done. This is a very bad time for the municipalities to get this. And they're coming here today. If you see your municipal leaders here at Province House, which I can't remember ever since I've been here, now I could be wrong, but I can't ever remember them coming to demonstrate on the street. This is municipal leaders. And then the minister and the premier say that they're not going to affect the municipalities, this MOU being cancelled. There's something wrong with this picture. But again, I've got to stress, anyone that's watching this, be assured that your property taxes are going up. And I truly hope that every single municipality in this province shows on the tax bill exactly how much this NDP government is costing the taxpayer in your area. The individual who gets your property tax bill, I hope that they surely put that on there and show that this money is actually going because of the MOU being cancelled by this NDP government. And I can tell you, I sit on council. I remember the $14 million bill that came with the property services when the assessment department was moved over to the municipalities. And it came late in the year. I can remember sitting on council at that time in Halifax Regional Municipality, and the Halifax Regional Municipality, compared to other municipalities, is very rich. They still had trouble battling with a $14 million increase. And eventually, who paid for it? The property tax owners. Not everybody, just the people that owns property taxes. And in that case, that's justified cost that they would have to pay that. But the MOU covers a lot more area. And indeed, if the government would have done what they said, especially when they changed had a surplus year of $400 million and said they're in a bad financial situation, I think is bad estimating. And when you look at the estimations they did, they're $750 million from what they estimated to what actually is supposed to happen. And then they download on the municipalities again on the property tax owners. We've got to be very careful here. The property tax owners are going to pay more tax because of the cancellation of this MOU, but you won't see it for this year. Probably next year you'll start to see it, and the year after. Thank you.
Motion is carried. The honourable member for the honourable leader of the Progressive Conservative Party for 30 seconds.
I wasn't anticipating 30 seconds, but I do just want to add my 2 cents worth as fast as I can, because there is an important principle at play beyond the dollars and cents when it comes to agreements that a government signs. And I find it interesting that the government has actually admitted that they're motivated by...
Order, please. Time has run out for debate going into supply. Thank you. The motion is carried. We will now take a short adjournment to let the minister and her staff set up for the Committee of Supply in the whole House. Thank you.
At this time, I will call the Committee of the Whole House on Supply to order. I recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Would you please call the estimates for the Minister of Health and Wellness and its resolution number E11?
I recognize the Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the Minister and her staff. I had an opportunity yesterday to talk very briefly and got some very good, detailed, lengthy answers, and I'm sure we'll get more today. And I've only got a few minutes in this session, but look forward to coming back after with a couple other things. But I want to get on to the importance of dialysis, not only in the province, and I understand it's there's been some discussion. I know that I don't know how many letters and calls. There's a lot of people in my area that transfer in for dialysis treatments. I have a gentleman that just lives down the street from me who's, I don't know, he's traveled for quite a while, and then he went on home dialysis, and now he's going to switch back. Home dialysis requires him to be hooked up every 3 hours, and he's a guy who's quite mobile, likes to get out, walk his dog, go to the mail, but he's really strapped by the 3 hours. So he's going to, I believe, start coming back to Halifax for that 3 days a week, 4-hour stint or whatever it might be, and an effort to give him a little better quality of life and to be able to use his time more effectively. So I've had other letters from people that, you know, it's gone on for years. We have people like Dial a Ride that are bringing people into Halifax. Thankfully, it's a great organization, but it does cost money. People are getting cabs, they're getting family, whoever they can, and a lot of them, as you would know, Minister, from certain areas of the province have been transferred by ambulance, which has been certainly time-consuming as well as very costly to the department and in the end of the day, I guess, to the taxpayer. Huge, huge cost around transferring patients for dialysis treatment. And so my first question is certainly around Hants Community Hospital. We know that we have the facility. We know that we have room. We know that we have the need. So I would ask the Minister this morning, is there potential that we will see in the near future? Is there a plan? What is it for dialysis in the Hants Community Hospital where it is certainly well needed, much needed, and would be well used? And what does that look like?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, and I want to thank the honourable member for bringing, I think, what is a really important topic to the floor for some discussion during the budget estimates for the Department of Health. It's interesting, you know, I talk about how, as Minister of Health, I have a variety of ways to identify what are the priority issues, and certainly correspondence to the minister is one of those ways. You see patterns, you see themes over and over again in your correspondence that alert you to issues that are important to people in the community, and certainly the issues that MLAs are raising from around the province on behalf of their constituents is a way to be alerted to issues that are out there in the healthcare system that are important. And dialysis services are certainly an area where I get a fair amount of correspondence and contact from individuals and MLAs and clinicians asking for an improvement in satellite clinics for dialysis patients. The department had done a review of the dialysis services in the province, and in the budget for this year, I know we do have additional money to $988,000, almost $1 million of additional revenue is in this year's budget to expand dialysis services. Now, The actual places where that will occur, I do not have that information yet. The process is one where the district health authorities will all be looking at their needs and will be submitting plans and proposals to the department. And I'm sure that's already occurred. We'll be working through those proposals. And based on the information we have around need, one of the, we talked last evening in estimates about the electronic medical records and what kind of information we'll be able to get from electronic medical records. And we already have a fair amount of information. And for example, we know where all of the patients in the province are who require dialysis services. But also population health data, I would assume, would help us predict as well where we're going to require services into the future. And so we, Capital District Health Authority operate 10 satellite sites right now. And I know that we have other dialysis sites. I visited St. Martha's in Scotia. They have dialysis there, and of course we have it in the Cape Breton District Health Authority as well as in Southwest Nova. And there additionally are a dialysis site at the IWK. So with respect to Windsor, I can't answer specifically that there will be a site in Windsor or an expansion in services, but there will be some expanded services because of the $988,000 in this year's budget.
Thank you. I recognize the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on that, Minister, that's good. I'm glad to hear that there's dollars allotted for the expansion of service. I do want to stress again the importance of Hants community, not only being able to handle that, but I'm sure you know, and I'm sure in the correspondence you've received, and I certainly know from my experience, that people with dialysis, I want to say, don't get better. It's 3 days a week to start, and then it's 4 and 5 days, and trips take a lot out of people, and they shorten that time frame, is what it does. And if they're not making that long trip to Halifax, and they're not having the very long days, they're getting better rest, they're able to be stronger physically, medically, therefore lasting longer before they get stretched out to that, 4 and 5 and 6 day period a week of having to be on dialysis. And there's a lot of folks actually that are on this 3-day traveling back and forth to Halifax right now, and I'm sure that you're aware of that and numbers, and I know that they're writing you, they're writing me, they're writing all of us, and rightly so. So I'm glad to hear that there's nearly $1 million in money for expansion, and that will be well received, and it will be even better received if we could see something at Hants Community Hospital. And it would be great to have it at a lot of hospitals around within, that outside of the hour and in and around that. We all know that that would be wonderful to have, and maybe someday we'll see that. And we also understand the costs that are associated with it as well. It's not as simple as the capital purchase of getting the equipment. It's the long-term staff, it's the facility, it's all of that. And I think that people understand that and they appreciate it as well as to what goes into that. So I am, again, glad to hear that there is some of that happening. We talked a bit, I don't have a lot of time, but we talked a bit yesterday about incentives for physicians and so on. I want to ask quickly on, so that I'm clear, and I think a lot of people aren't clear on it, as to how physicians are hired and or paid, Minister. And I know that that depends on emerge, nights and days, hourly versus number of patients. I want to confirm, though, I guess for my own self and for others, in the clinic situation or in the office situation, that patients go in, they see the doc, the doctor is paid for fee for service, so by the number. If I see 5 patients today, I'm paid for 5. If I see 50, I'm paid for 50, as opposed to maybe the hourly or and or combination thereof at emergency departments. So I guess, yeah, just to be clear, the way that doctors are paid in those circumstances, if you will. So let's use the QE to Emerge, which is a busy, busy facility, as we know, and then let's use perhaps maybe Enhanced Community.
The member's time is now expired. I would like to introduce the honourable member for Pictou West on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased. We're always pleased when we have young people join us in the legislature, and this morning we have a group of interested young folks from the North Shore, the 596 Phoenix Squadron Tatamagouche Air Cadets are with us today, taking in the proceedings of the legislature and of our session here this morning. And there's about 20 Air Cadets, as well as Captain April McKenzie, their squadron leader, and a number of other leaders and parents with them. So we're pleased they're here, and I'm going to ask them to rise and to be recognized here by the House this morning.
I recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the Honourable Minister stood to say he was happy to see young people here in the legislature, I thought he may have been referring to myself and some of my colleagues, but he was talking about much younger people here in the gallery. But I certainly want to extend my welcome as well to 596 Phoenix Squadron, and certainly commend their leaders and chaperones for bringing you to the legislature here today. Just briefly, no, I'm sure this is a chance for them to see democracy in action. And just to give them a brief understanding of what we're doing right now is that the government, which sits over on that side, we're the opposition, the Liberal caucus here, and that is the Conservative caucus just over to my left. The government has brought in a budget. What we now do as members of the opposition is that it's our opportunity to question the government on their budget and on some of the spending priorities and some of the concerns that we may have, both locally and provincially. And right now we have the Honourable Minister of Health who is here to discuss her budget, which is the single largest budget of the government that's being presented. I don't have the total figure in front of me, but it's, I believe, almost $4 billion. Which is a significant amount of money, to say the least. And the minister has her deputy with her, and I believe one of her finance representatives as well, who are here to assist her in answering some of our questions. So I will take a few minutes now to raise some concerns. I represent Richmond County, which is on Cape Breton Island, and I will take the opportunity just to ask a few questions about some local issues. And Minister, I know you've been at this for a while now. I will do my best to be brief in my questions, and I would certainly appreciate as much as possible if you could be brief in your answers so that I can get some of the issues that are of concern locally, and which doesn't eat up too much time from my colleagues who I know have a number of questions as well. Minister, you'd be, as you're well aware, St. Anne's Community Nursing Care Centre was one of the sites identified in the Ross report as, I believe it's the care model, I believe is what it's being defined as. As you know, that has caused great concern in our area because of the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, and I've given these numbers to the Minister before, I believe the St. Anne's Centre emergency room in the last 15 years has been closed for 10 days. So it is not a chronic problem that has been identified in other communities, and I can tell you residents of Ville-Madame, Louisdale and surrounding areas can see Dr. McNeil on Monday morning if they need to see Dr. McNeil on Monday morning. So the idea that chronic closures of emergency rooms plus not being able to see your doctor, family doctor in a timely fashion is not a problem in our area. So I guess the message that the board has given, that the community has given, that the local doctors have given is that it's not broken. It is working in our community, and we're not sure why monies would be expended to try to fix a problem that doesn't exist. So I know in the budget you've identified Parsboro as one of the sites that would be under this model. I believe it's already in place, but you've also indicated, I believe there's at least 3 more sites that are planned for this fiscal year. We don't know what those 3 sites are, at least I don't know. So on behalf of the community, the board, and the local physicians, could you advise us what the intention is of the department in regards to St. Anne's and the conclusions drawn by the Ross report?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I too would like to welcome our guests in the gallery. The question that has been asked with respect to St. Anne's is a very good one. And I want to assure the honourable member that I have no intention of fiddling in something that's working. If it's working, then I have plenty of things that aren't working that need my attention, and that's where my attention is going to go. It's not going to be diverted into solving problems that don't exist. I do want to say to the member that I feel badly that I haven't gotten around to visiting St. Anne's. And it's definitely on my list, and we're trying very hard to find a time this spring to go for a visit. Not to be the bearer of bad news, but to, just inform myself of this, of the services of this centre. And I say this because Dr. Ross spoke very highly of this particular centre. He impressed on me, I think, the uniqueness of that centre. He was actually very complimentary of a number of healthcare facilities on Cape Breton Island, including what they're doing in the community of Cheticamp. But I have always wanted to go to the St. Anne's Centre, and it wouldn't be that far a visit from where my parents live in some ways, and I've been spending a fair amount of time over the last little while because of my father's illness. I go fairly frequently to that area, but it's hard, I find, sometimes to fit in a business visit and a family visit, and so it just hasn't come together. But it is my plan, and I think we've identified a potential date sometime later in the late spring or early summer. And but I do want to reassure the member that the other CECs that we'll be announcing this year, that will not be one of them. We're really very much focused on those communities where people are having a difficult time getting access to a family doctor or other healthcare provider, where the waits are long, where then the traffic is into emergency rooms, and putting a burden on those healthcare facilities that are hard to cope with. And it's not to say that at some point in the future we won't have to look at a CEC in that community, but it's certainly not, something that is going to happen anytime soon.
I recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Well, thank you, Madam Minister. And needless to say, I'm sure that both the board, staff, and the doctors and the community will be pleased to hear that answer. And I can tell you, and I know that the minister's family doesn't live too far from Cape Breton, but you are on the mainland. So I do want to point out that, and I'm sure the deputy would recognize that in Cape Breton, showing up at the last minute or showing up unannounced is never frowned upon. So don't hesitate that if you do have time in your schedule, even if it's a couple of hours. I know that the board and the staff and the local doctors will certainly do everything to accommodate the minister in on very short notice, because I commend the minister for a statement, because sitting in an office here in Halifax and hearing what St. Anne offers truly doesn't give you an appreciation until you walk through the facility. You see the diabetic clinic. You see all of the services that are being offered. And I know there's more collaboration taking place now with GASHA. The fact that they are still a standalone entity, not under a district health authority, there is those services being provided. There is a great relationship. And ironically, after years of doctor shortages, we're actually looking right now at a number of medical students who have already indicated that they are coming to our area. One has already been signed starting September, and there's at least 2 or 3 more that are ready to come. So for us, we're in the best situation we've been in a long time, and so having that stability at St. Anne's Centre is a significant part of that recruitment effort, and I'm certainly pleased to hear that there will not be any changes this fiscal year, and I would again encourage the Minister, once she sees the facility, hopefully will conclude that there is no need to make any changes at St. Anne's, because it clearly is working well. The community is very supportive of it, and the amount of extra services that are being provided both in education and in support for various ailments and diseases is truly incredible. I also wanted to raise with the Minister one of our other proposed health facilities, which would be the Dr. W.B. Kingston Memorial Health Clinic. The Minister knows I've raised this in the House before. She's received correspondence from the organization. Right now, this group has been working on this for a number of years, and the previous government truly gave them the runaround. There's no better way to explain it. They went straight to the Premier and were given nothing but the runaround, and I was embarrassed that a government would have done that to a group that was trying to raise money, to send them to visit government agencies that clearly were not in a position to give them any funding at all. So it has been a struggle for them. They're again now at the period where they are questioning if this project's going to move forward. They have secured the money from ECBC. They have secured the money from the municipality, and local fundraising is going very well, with another major event being planned for mid-May. Right now, the only partner not at the table is the province, which is very unfortunate, because everything else is in place. The minute that they hear from the province in a positive way, the project's ready to move forward. This is going to bring medical professionals under one roof. It's going to replace a very old facility, which used to be the old home where the nuns stayed, that they turned over to the community as a medical clinic. So could the Minister today, as briefly as possible, just give me an indication of, are there still ongoing discussions about the province being a funding partner in the construction of the new W.B. Kingston Memorial Clinic in Lardwes?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to tell the member that he can probably look forward to not having to ask me this question perhaps next year. A couple of things. I mean, better care sooner is very much about improving primary care, and about working with communities around their existing infrastructure and their existing healthcare providers' needs. And when you have a community like this one, who is in this situation and they've done all of this good work, it's almost like they have anticipated what the government's plan and priority was going to be. And although many of the CECs are focused on small community hospitals and working with those entities to bring them into a more modern healthcare era, the practice at a clinic or a community health center such as this one is also a part of that plan, even though it isn't a small community hospital. And so one of the things I've been concerned about is that we don't seem to have, or we didn't seem to have in the department, a real infrastructure program to support these kinds of standalone community health centers, but we are changing that. And so this particular community health center we will work with this community health centre, and I understand that correspondence came in to me very recently in the last couple of days, and I will have a chance to look at that, but we will attempt to do something in this fiscal year to bring this project to fruition and give that community a modern healthcare centre and you know, support the good work that they have done. So if your question is about the province being a partner, we will be a partner in this.
Recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Well, I'm certainly pleased to hear that, and I certainly want to commend not only the minister, but I know that your deputy as well has been working very closely on this. And again, this is not a criticism of the existing government, because previous administrations have also not provided any infrastructure funding for these standalone clinics that weren't either attached to a hospital or part of a district health authority. So this is something new that's being requested, and I understand that there are other communities that have put proposals forward as well, that if there isn't a change in the policy, will not be eligible for any funding either. And what's frustrating is that when you have the federal government that sees this as a worthwhile investment, and yet the province is not at the table, that's what the community finds so frustrating. So I'm very pleased to hear that, and I believe the correspondence most recently sent to the minister was requesting a meeting. I know they're prepared to come up here in Halifax. I don't think they're looking for much time, but I think at this point they would like to hear the reassurances similar to what the minister has given today, and I do hope that we can find some time within the next week or so to try to bring them up here and find some time from the minister's busy schedule that she can meet with them, because I'm sure the minister knows and doesn't need me to say, these are volunteers. They're people who are giving freely of their time. They've done a tremendous amount of work. I believe it's fair to say that this has been ongoing for at least 4 years. That work has been done on this. So they're still hanging in there. Money is still coming in from different organizations that want to be a part of the fundraising effort. But right now the missing link is investment from the province. So I'm pleased to hear that, and we'll certainly, I'm more than happy to continue to work with the minister and the deputy to try to arrange a meeting as quickly as possible, and as well anything that I can do to assist in the efforts for the discussions that are taking place, we'll certainly be happy to do so. So with that, those are a couple of the issues I wanted to raise. I could go on at length about the caregiver programs and some of my concerns there, but I believe we will have an opportunity, both through question period and hopefully through other debates, to talk about some of those programs. The minister knows well my concerns, especially support for family caregivers, daughters, sons, sisters, those within the family that do provide care. And unfortunately, the new programs that are out, again, seem to exclude direct funding to family members, which is extremely unfortunate, because I know in my own community, caregivers are family. People don't want strangers. They don't want people other than their family. Asking for someone to care for you is a very private thing. I still have people that won't even take home care, even though they should, because they don't like the idea of a stranger coming into their home, and it's a matter of pride as well. So it's always a challenge. But when you see that programs come out and that family members are excluded, it is disheartening, and I do hope, I think the minister has indicated that these programs will change over time. I do hope that at one point that family members are eligible. As I've said before, for the most part, caregivers are females. They leave the workforce to care for loved ones, and now to be told that we respect you as a caregiver, but any financial incentives given will be given to others and not to you, I think is extremely unfortunate. And I do hope that the minister and her staff will continue to work on finding ways of supporting family members who leave the workforce and who give up everything basically to become caregivers for their loved ones. As I said, the minister has heard me go on about this at length before, and I do hope to see the day where family members will be eligible for these supports, and that those who are receiving care can pick their own caregivers, with family members not being excluded. But with that, I do want to thank the Minister for her answers. I'm trying to think of any other health issues that I could get such positive answers about in Richmond County, but I will stop at the two very good news that we received today on St. Anne's and on the Kingston Clinic, and do appreciate the Minister's responses on that. And I believe my colleague from Halifax Clayton Park, our health critic, has some more questions. Thank you.
I recognize the member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased to get up again and have some more questions with the Minister of Health. As the health critic, I've shared my time with other members, as you can see, who have health facilities in their ridings and some questions that they wanted to find out more about. I'd like the Minister to go back to the subject we were talking about several days ago, and that was Dalhousie Medical School and the funding for the medical school seats. And I just had a few questions to fine-tune or to sort of dig down a little deeper into that. And I know the Minister had said the other day that it is a complex I guess, agreement that you have, or perhaps a number of different agreements with Dalhousie. And last year, again, just to preface it, but last year there was confusion around the amount of money that Dalhousie would get for their physician training seats. And there was, in fact, a line item in the budget last year called physician training, and it's not there this year. So it was a little harder for us to dig down and find out exactly what is available and whether the monies that we're giving are going to be coming from the Department of Health, or whether, in fact, they're coming from the new Department of Workforce Development and Labour and Advanced Education. Thank you. The names have changed on a lot of the departments, so I have to keep up on those names. But just to go back to that, and you know, I'd like to know, and I'd also ask the Minister if she could be brief too, because I've shared my time with other members, I have a lot of different subjects I'd like to go to. So does the Department of Health and Wellness transfer funds to the Department of Labour and Advanced Education for the funding of physician training seats? That would be the first question.
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And the answer to that question is no. We do not transfer funds to the other department for physician training seats. And I just remind the member, when we were talking about this item the other night, we indicated that the line item on physician training seats has been moved to other medical payments. It's been put into that category, and that's, or a physician. It's all in physician payments, so that's why you don't see it anymore.
I recognize the member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I realize it's been rolled together. I would like to know if there was a rationale for doing that, because as we roll more and more items into a sort of a big umbrella item, we lose track of where the funding is. And, you know, again, there are a lot of people that are interested in how we're funding our medical students. This year, as a result of cuts to the universities, or a change in the MOU, we're looking at what has been announced as a 10% increase in medical school tuition. And I understand the government does subsidize medical schools and the tuition of the students, but a 10% increase is going to be, you know, significant for those students. So my question would be, again, just in the interest of accountability, why did you choose to remove funding for physician training seats as a single line item?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
The decision was made to keep all of our physician-related costs together in one area. What we could do is we could break out those payments in future accounts that would tell you what the various components that make that up is, and I accept that probably would be a very good thing to do, because then it would allow you to have a clearer understanding of what are all of the elements that go into that category.
I recognize the member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the Minister, I appreciate that, and I think it would be good in future years. I know that Dalhousie would themselves be looking for that to understand it better, so that would be good. I wanted to go back to the 8 seats that the Minister had referred to, and I know that I was surprised when we talked about 8. I asked you a little bit more about it. I wondered if you could just say, are those the 8 seats for Nova Scotia students that were introduced under the Conservative government that were in exchange for a return for service agreement? And that had been something that the Liberals had been asking for. We wanted to see 10 of the seats that were vacated when the New Brunswick school started up. We wanted to see them all allocated to return for service agreements. That is asking the young physician students to sign on to go to areas of Nova Scotia that we wanted. So it's just a question of clarification for the Minister. Is that where the 8 come from that agreement?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
I think that is the case, Mr. Chair.
I recognize the member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Yeah. My last question on this, Mr. Chair, for the Minister is really just to clarify that the amount is in the range of $500,000, or it might be closer to $600,000, but it's in that range, that you have allocated for Dalhousie University this year.
I'll let her answer.
And will there be any more? You mentioned that there's a committee meeting now that are looking at the funding of the university. Are you expecting that there will be more funds required for Dalhousie as a result of that, or have you put that in a separate contingency, or is there another line item where you have, sometimes we have a line item that captures things like new contract negotiations or things that are uncertain that will come up in the year. Have you put some money aside in the event that that's what the committee decides?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
The amount we have is in the line item is $539,800. We are in negotiations with Dalhousie, and so we do have elsewhere money, but I'm not, because we are in negotiations, I'm not going to discuss that amount.
I recognize the Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a number of introductions that I would like to make, if I may. Seated in the gallery, in the surrounding galleries, Mr. Chairman, are a number of important people in our province. I will start my introductions with the President of the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities and the Mayor of Port Hawkesbury, Mr. Billy Joe McLean, who I believe is in the West Gallery. If he is, yes he is. If I could ask members to East Gallery. He's in the East Gallery. Recognize Mr. McLean, and I should say, Mr. Chair, I would like the members on the government side to take particular notice of the people that are in the gallery this afternoon, because they are the ones whose agreement was ripped up. They are the ones who now have to implement the dirty work of that government, Mr. Chair.
Order.
Shame.
Yeah.
Shame.
I recognize the Leader of the Progressive Conservative.
Mr. Chair, I guess I got carried away given the gravity of the situation, but I do want the members on the government side to look very carefully at all of the people that are in the gallery this afternoon. I started my introduction with Mr. McLean of Port Hawkesbury. I would also like to draw the members' attention to Mayor Peter Kelly of the Halifax Regional Municipality, Charlie Sutherland of the town of Westville, Alette McDonald from the county of Pictou, Lee Noss, the Deputy Mayor of the municipality of the district of, what's L? Lunenburg? Lunenburg, thank you. Martin Bell, councillor with the district of Lunenburg, Basil Oikel from Lunenburg, Alan Dill, a good friend of mine and the mayor of Spring Hill, Mayor Corkum of Kentville, Mayor Ruddy of the town of Stewiacke, Mayor Lloyd Jenkins from beautiful Cumberland County and specifically the town of Oxford, Councillor Sandra Stratton of the district of Lunenburg. I have approximately 68 of these to do, Mr. Chair, should I continue, or perhaps I'll table the rest of the introductions? I think my point is 46 of the 55 municipal units in Nova Scotia are represented in the gallery today, and these are the people that are here to make an important point to that government about agreements and so on. And so I'll just table the rest for today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I recognize the member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd also like to welcome the many representatives from the UNSM that are here today. I see many people from Halifax Regional Municipality, which is, of course, my municipality, but I do see people from every corner of the province. And we have been speaking earlier in the day in our speaking into supply, which is about a 45-minute period. The members of the opposition on both opposition parties have spoken about the MOU and your concerns today. So I certainly want to let you know that it's on our agenda. And now we are here because it's the estimates, and we are asking the Health Minister questions on the budget of health, which is our #1 largest budget item, approaching $4 billion. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, I'd like to go to the subject of the tobacco control strategy. Today, and actually in our previous 2 days of discussions on the health budget, we haven't really talked a lot about health promotion and protection, which is now part of the Department of Health and Wellness. And there's certainly the area of the tobacco control strategy was an area where we had made some pretty tremendous gains. And I know there'd been investment in social media and marketing and money put towards reducing our tobacco consumption and the number and percentage of Nova Scotians who are smoking. And what I noticed was in the most recent figures, we've flattened out on a lot of that. A lot of our improvements have stopped. And I think in the area of some of the youngest smokers, the 15 to 20-year-olds, and I think the group above that, 25 and to 30, it's actually risen by 3%, so in both those categories. So I know that the Canadian Cancer Society and the Smoke Free Nova Scotia and all of the partners that are in that umbrella group are really keen to know what we're doing now, because the former tobacco control strategy ended in 2007. And we have been waiting for a new strategy. What I was told was actually there was to be one, I believe, by 2009, that it was supposed to come into play, a brand new strategy to fight tobacco. And we need to do that because we still have tremendous high levels of lung cancer and deaths associated with smoking, cardiovascular disease, and all the other negative health outcomes that come from smoking. So I wonder if the minister could first of all tell me, and I'll be specific, what line item can we find where can we find it, what line item for the tobacco control strategy?
I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the honourable member brings an important topic to the budget estimates today. You know, the cost of tobacco on our society, I think, distresses us all. And probably it distresses health ministers probably more than most. We know that there's a significant human cost to the use of tobacco. Many of us, probably all of us, certainly most of us, have been touched by the loss of a friend or a family member to a smoking-related illness or death. And we know that the cost of treatment for diseases related to tobacco use on our healthcare system is significant. It's interesting, I get a lot of material coming across my desk as Minister of Health, a lot of different studies, a lot of different proposals, a lot of different plans, strategies. And one of the things that I've noticed in some of the material crossing my desk is conflicting, I guess you would say, conflicting numbers. Now, I've seen recently numbers from different studies about what the financial impact is on the healthcare system of smoking-related illness. But even though, and that frustrates me a bit, because what frustrates me is, you know, I might read a draft of the tobacco strategy, and it'll tell me one thing about the cost, and then I might read a draft from the mental health and addictions group, and I see